I'm going to give you an introduction to the standard ISO 45001 for occupational health and safety management systems. So when we think about management systems, we have expectations. The purpose is to provide a framework, and the aim is to manage. Management systems have an outcome, and their intended outcome is to prevent and protect. Now, what management systems are available for health, safety and environment? For HSE, there are two internationally available management system frameworks available. The first is one that you'll all be familiar with, is the ISO 14001, which predominantly focuses on environmental. For those of you who are familiar with the OHSMS 18001, that was the Occupational Health and Safety Assessment Series. Well, as I said earlier, we now have a new kid on the block, launched on the 12th of March, and it was much awaited by many people, and it's the international standard ISO 45001, which focuses on occupational health and safety. For HSE meeting expectations, the two standards, 14001 and 45001, provide a framework. Their aim is to manage HSE risks and opportunities. And of course, the intended outcome is to prevent work-related injuries, ill health to workers, and protect the environment. This course explores ISO 45001, which was first introduced in March 2018. In this course, we're going to look at framework and features, requirements and interpretation. We're going to look at a gap analysis and a tool that I've specifically developed for the training course, and also what next. During the course of its development, I'm sure a lot of you heard the expression Annex SL. So what is this origin of Annex SL? We have to dive back into the directive for the ISO standard, and if you flick through the document, which is quite a heavy document, there are several annexes. One of the annexes in there is Annex SL, which is about proposals for management system standards. But what does that mean? Annex SL, what exactly is Annex SL? Well, the format of ISO 45000 is based upon Annex SL, and in summary, it has to have a common high-level structure. It has to have a standardized core text and standardized core definitions. The intention is to enable better integration of multiple management systems such as environmental, quality and information security. Annex SL has a high-level structure. Without going into too much detail, you can see there on the slide it says clause 1 to 10. And it's going through scope, references, leadership, planning, support, operation through to improvement. It's great news for anyone involved in ISO management standards because it's the same structure and the definitions are all standardized. This allows greater efficiency. Clause 4 relates to the context of the organization, and the first subclause 4.1 is about understanding the organization and its context. Has the organisation determined external and internal issues that are relevant and affect its ability to achieve the intended outcome of the management system? Subclause 4.2 is about understanding the needs and expectations of workers and other interested parties. In this context, has the organisation determined the needs and expectations of workers who are affected by the OHSMS management system, and also needs and expectations of relevant interested parties? You may also be familiar with interested parties being known as stakeholders. And which needs and expectations are or could become legal requirements and other requirements. Subclause 4.3 is all about the scope of the OHSMS management system. And here, have boundaries and applicability been determined in establishing the scope? Has the scope considered external and internal issues? Does the scope take into account planned or performed work-related activities? And does it include activities, products, services within the organization's control or influence that can impact the OHS performance? And finally, is the scope available as documented information? Subclause 4.4 is about the OHS management system. And here we're looking if the organization has established requirements, if it has implemented the requirements, if it's maintained the necessary requirements, and is there evidence of continuous improvement. Clause 5 is about leadership and worker participation, and subclause 5.1 is about leadership and commitment. Here we need to see if top management has demonstrated leadership and commitment by taking overall responsibility and accountability for the prevention of work-related injury and ill health, as well as the provision of safe and healthy workplaces and activities. Has top management demonstrated leadership and commitment by ensuring that the policy and objectives are established and are compatible with the strategic direction of the organization? And has it ensured the integration of the OHS management system requirements into the organization's business processes? Has top management demonstrated leadership and commitment by ensuring that the resources needed to establish, implement, maintain, and improve the management system are available? Are they communicating the importance of an effective OHS management system and also conformance with the requirements? How about ensuring that the management system achieves its intended outcomes? And has top management demonstrated leadership and commitment by directing and supporting persons to contribute to the effectiveness of the management system? Has top management also demonstrated leadership and commitment by ensuring and promoting continual improvement, supporting other relevant management roles to demonstrate their leadership as it applies to their areas of responsibility? And have they also demonstrated leadership and commitment by developing, leading and promoting a culture in the organization that supports the intended outcomes of the management system, and also protecting workers from reprisals when reporting incidents, hazards, risks and opportunities? Has top management demonstrated leadership and commitment by ensuring the organization establishes and implements a process or processes for consultation and participation of workers? How about supporting the establishment and functioning of health and safety committees? Subclause 5.2 relates to the policy. Have top management established, implemented and maintained a policy such that it includes a commitment to provide safe and healthy working conditions for the prevention of work-related injury and ill health? Is it appropriate to the purpose, the size and context of the organization and specific to the nature of its risks and opportunities? Does it provide a framework for setting the objectives? And does it include a commitment to fulfill legal requirements and other requirements? Does it include a commitment to eliminate hazards and reduce OHS risks? How about a commitment to continually improve the OHS management system? And a commitment on consultation and participation of workers and, where they exist, workers' representatives? Is the organization's policy available as documented information? Is it communicated within the organization? Is it available to interested parties as appropriate? And is it relevant and appropriate? Subclause 5.3 is about organisational roles, responsibilities and authorities. Are responsibilities and authorities for relevant roles within the OHS management system assigned and communicated at all levels? Are responsibilities and authorities for relevant roles within the management system maintained as documented information? And are workers at each level of the organisation designated responsibility for those aspects of the management system which they have control? Has top management assigned responsibility and authority for ensuring that the management system conforms to the requirements of the standard, in this case ISO 45001? And also, have they assigned responsibility and authority for reporting on the performance of the management system to top management? Subclause 5.4 is about consultation and participation of workers. Here we're looking to see if the top management has established, implemented and maintained processes for workers' representatives, if they exist, consultation and participation of workers at all applicable levels and functions, and the development, planning, implementation, performance evaluation and actions for improving the OHS management system. Also on consultation and participation of workers, has the organisation provided mechanisms, time, training and resources which are necessary for consultation and participation? Has the organisation provided timely access to clear and understandable information about the management system? Has it determined and removed obstacles or barriers to the participation and minimised those that can't be removed? Staying with consultation and participation of workers, does the organisation emphasise consultation of non-managerial workers with regard to determining the needs and expectations of interested parties or stakeholders, and also in establishing the policy and assigning organisational roles, responsibilities and authorities as applicable, and also in determining how to fulfil legal and other requirements? Does the organisation emphasise consultation of non-managerial workers with regard to establishing objectives and planning to achieve them for the OHS management system, determining applicable controls for outsourcing, procurement and contractors, and determining what needs to be monitored, measured and evaluated, and also in planning, establishing, implementing and maintaining an audit program or programs, and also ensuring continual improvement? Does the organisation emphasise participation of non-managerial workers with regard to determining the mechanisms for their consultation and participation, identifying hazards and assessing risks and opportunities? How about determining actions to eliminate hazards and reduce OHS risks, and determining competence requirements, training needs, training and also evaluating training? Staying with consultation and participation of workers, again for non-managerial workers, has the organisation looked at determining what needs to be communicated and how this will be done, determining control measures and their effective implementation and use, and investigating incidents and non-conformities and determining corrective actions? Clause 6 is quite detailed, and as you can see from the sections that are in the standard, there are quite a few sub-clauses to be discussed. So please take your time, there's no rush, and you can always stop the video, reverse and go forward at your convenience. In clause 6, The first subclause is the actions to address risks and opportunities, and there is a subclause under general, and this is asking if the organisation has determined the risks and opportunities that need addressing so as to give assurance that the management system can achieve its intended outcomes and to prevent or reduce the undesired effects, and also to achieve continuous improvement. In determining risks and opportunities, have the following been taken into consideration: hazards, risks and other risks associated with OHSMS, opportunities and other improvements, and legal and other requirements for occupational health and safety. Have the following been taken into consideration during the planning process for risks and opportunities and before implementation, regardless of being permanent or temporary? And that is changes in the organisation, changes in the process, in the management system. And does the organisation maintain documented information on risks and opportunities, processes and actions needed to determine and address the associated risks and opportunities? Staying with the clause 6.1 and actions to address risks and opportunities, subclause 6.1.2 deals with hazard identification and assessment of risks and opportunities. We go another layer down on this and we look at hazard identification. And here, has the organisation established, implemented and maintained a process or processes for hazard identification that is ongoing and proactive? There's a lot of things that hazard identification needs to take into account. And for example, how the work is organised, social factors including workload, work hours, victimisation, harassment and bullying, leadership and culture within the organisation. For non-routine and routine activities, does the hazard identification take into account other factors such as infrastructure, equipment, materials, chemicals, etc.? It would be advisable that on this particular slide you may want to pause and make a note of the various specific situations. These are straight out of the standard, and rather than go through each one by one, it'd be better for you to tailor make it to your organisational needs. And also, does the hazard identification process take into account past relevant incidents, internal or external, including emergencies and their causes, also potential emergency situations? Does the hazard identification process take into account people, including consideration of those with access to the workplace and their activities, including workers, contractors, visitors and other persons? Also those in the vicinity of the workplace who can be affected by the activities of the organisation, and workers at a location not under the direct control of the organisation. Does the hazard identification process also take into account other factors such as the design of the work area, processes, installations, machinery and equipment, and operating procedures? Also, does it take into account other factors such as work organisation, including adaptation, special needs and capabilities of the workers involved? Also, situations occurring in the vicinity of the workplace caused by work-related activities under the control of the organisations. Does it also take into account situations not controlled by the organisation and occurring in the vicinity of the workplace that can cause injury and ill health to persons in the workplace? And does the hazard identification process take into account other factors such as actual or proposed changes in, and there's a lot here, organisation, operations, processes, activities, the OHSMS management system, and knowledge of and information about hazards. In sub-clause 6.1.2.2, which is about the assessment of occupational health and safety risks and other risks to the management system, has the organisation established, implemented and maintained processes to assess the risks from the identified hazards while taking into account the effectiveness of existing controls, determine and assess other risks related to the establishment, implementation, operation and maintenance of the management system. And for assessing the risks, does the organisation have a defined, systematic and proactive, not reactive, methodology and criteria? Are methodologies and criteria documented? And does the methodology and criteria for assessing risks take into consideration the scope and is it documented? And does the methodology and criteria for assessing risks take into consideration nature and also timing? In sub-clause 6.1.2.3, where it's about assessment of opportunities and other opportunities for the OHS management system, has the organisation established, implemented and maintained a process or processes to assess opportunities to either enhance the performance of the OHS management system, adapt the work or adapt the organisation of the work, eliminate hazards, reduce the risks for OHS, improve the management system, or adapt the work environment to workers? Staying with 6.1, actions to address risks and opportunities, subclause 6.1.3 is about the determination of legal requirements and other requirements. Here, has the organisation established, implemented and maintained processes to determine and have access to up-to-date legal requirements and other requirements that are applicable to the hazards, the risks and the OHS management system? Has the organisation determined how these legal and other requirements apply to the organisation and what needs to be communicated? Staying with the determination of legal requirements and other requirements, has the organisation established, implemented and maintained processes to take applicable legal and other requirements into account when establishing, implementing, maintaining and continually improving its management system? And also maintain and retain documented information on its legal and other requirements. Also to ensure that legal and other requirements are periodically reviewed and updated to reflect any changes. In subclause 6.1.4 about planning action, does the plan take into consideration actions to address these risks and opportunities, actions to address legal and other requirements, actions to prepare for and respond to emergency situations, and also does it take into consideration the hierarchy of controls? Not to forget the outputs from the OHS management system when planning to take action. Does the plan also take into consideration best practices, technological options, financial requirements, operational requirements and business requirements? Does the plan take into consideration how to integrate and implement the actions into its OHS management system processes or other business processes? Evaluate the effectiveness of these actions. Clause 6.2 is about objectives and planning to achieve them for occupational health and safety. And subclause 6.2.1 is about objectives. Has the organisation established objectives at relevant functions and levels in order to maintain and continually improve the management system and its performance? Do the objectives take into account the applicable requirements, the results of the assessment of risks and opportunities, and the results of consultation with workers and, if they exist, workers' representatives. Are the objectives consistent with the policy, measurable, capable of performance evaluation, monitored and communicated? Are they also updated as appropriate? Subclause 6.2.2 is about planning to achieve the objectives. And when planning how to achieve the objectives, has the organisation determined what will be done? What are the resources required? Who will be responsible? When will it be completed? And how the results will be evaluated? Let's not forget the indicators for monitoring and also how the actions to achieve the OHS objectives will be integrated into the organisation's business processes. Clause 7 deals with support, and as with Clause 6 and 5, there's a lot of subsections involved, so please take your time. Clause 7.1 is about resources, and here has the organisation determined and provided the necessary resources for the establishment, implementation, maintenance and continuous improvement of the OHS management system. Clause 7.2 relates to competence. Has the organisation determined the necessary competence of workers that affects or can affect its OHS performance? And does it ensure that workers are competent on the basis of appropriate education, training or experience? And where applicable, has the organisation taken actions to acquire and maintain the necessary competence and evaluate the effectiveness of any actions taken? And has the organisation retained appropriate documented information as evidence of competence? 7.3 is awareness, and are workers made aware of the policy, the OHS objectives, and their contribution to the effectiveness of the OHS management system, including the benefits associated with performance improvements? And are workers made aware of their implications and potential consequences of not conforming to the management system requirements, and the incidents and outcomes of investigations that are relevant to them? Are workers made aware of hazards and the risks and actions that are determined to be relevant to them and their activities? Are workers made aware of their ability to remove themselves from situations which could pose an imminent and serious danger to their life or health, and also the arrangements for protecting them from undue consequences for doing so? 7.4 Communication, and in general, has the organisation established, implemented and maintained processes needed for internal and external communications? Has the organisation determined or taken into account what it will communicate, when to communicate, whom to communicate to, and internal communications requirements amongst the various levels and functions within the organisation? Let's not forget communication requirements amongst contractors and visitors to their workplaces. Has the organisation determined or taken into account communication requirements amongst other interested parties, and how to communicate requirements? Also diversity aspects when considering its communication needs, and the views of external interested parties. When establishing its communication processes, has the organisation taken into account legal and other requirements? Ensured that the information to be communicated is consistent with the information generated within the OHS management system, and also that it's reliable? When establishing its communication process, has the organisation responded to relevant communications in the OHS management system, and it has retained documented information as evidence of its communications? With regards to internal communication, has the organisation internally communicated information relevant to the OHS management system amongst the various levels and functions within the organisation, including changes to the management system as and when appropriate? as it also ensured its communication processes enable workers to contribute towards continuous improvement. On external communication, as the organisation externally communicated information relevant on the system that the organisation considers important, taking into account legal and other requirements. On documented information, does the organisation include the required documented information and documented information determined by the organisation as being necessary for an effective OHSMS management system? When creating and updating, does the organisation ensure identification and description, title, date, author, and also format, language, software version, graphics? Let's not forget review and approval for suitability and adequacy. For control of documented information, is documented information required by the management system controlled to ensure that it's readily available and suitable for use, and is adequately protected from loss of confidentiality and improper use or loss of integrity? For the control of documented information, has the organisation addressed distribution, access, retrieval and use, storage and preservation, control of changes, retention and disposal? And for the control of documented information, has the organisation addressed documented information of external origin determined by the organisation necessary for the planning and operation of the management system has been identified and is controlled? Clause 8 and 8.1 is about operational planning and control, and in general, has the organisation planned, implemented, controlled and maintained processes needed to meet the requirements of the management system? And at multi-employer workplaces, has the organisation coordinated the relevant parts of the management system with other organisations? Has the organisation implemented actions to establish criteria for the processes and actions to control the processes in accordance with the criteria? Also actions for maintaining and retaining documented information to the extent necessary to have confidence that the processes have been carried out as planned, and actions for adapting work to the workers. 8.1.2 is around eliminating hazards and reducing OHSMS risks. And has the organisation established, implemented and maintained a process or processes for the elimination of hazards and reduction of risks using the following hierarchy: elimination of the hazard, substitution with less hazardous processes, operations, materials or equipment, using engineered controls and reorganisation of the work, or administrative controls including training, and last is using adequate PPE or personal protective equipment. 8.1.3 is around management of change, and has the organisation reviewed the consequences of unintended changes, taking action to mitigate any diverse effects as necessary? Has the organisation established processes for implementing and controlling planned, temporary and permanent changes associated with, and there's a list of items here straight out the standard, but not to spend too long on it, for example, new products, legal and other requirements, work organisation. 8.1 is operational planning and control, and 8.1.4 is about procurement. Another subsection is 8.1.4.1 for general, where it asks, has the organisation established, implemented and maintained a process or processes to control procurement of products and services in order to ensure conformance with the management system? 8.1.4.2 is contractors, and has the organisation ensured that the requirements of its management system are met by contractors and their workers? And does the procurement process define and also apply occupational health and safety criteria for the selection of contractors? Staying with contractors, does the organisation coordinate its procurement processes with its contractors in order to identify hazards and to assess and control risks arising from the contractor's activities and operations that impact the organisation, the organisation's activities and operations that impact the contractor's workers, and contractors' activities and operations that impact other interested parties in the workplace. For outsourcing, does the organisation ensure that outsourced functions and processes are controlled? And does the organisation ensure that the outsourcing arrangements are consistent with legal and other requirements with regards to achieving the intended outcomes of the management system? And is a type and degree of control to be applied to outsourcing functions and processes defined? 8.2 deals with emergency preparedness and response. Does the organisation maintain and retain documented information on the processes and plans for responding to potential emergency situations? Has the organisation established, implemented and maintained a process or processes needed to prepare for and respond to potential emergency situations, including establishing a planned response to an emergency situation, including the provision of first aid, providing training for the planned response, periodically testing and exercising the planned response capability, and evaluating performance and, as necessary, revising the planned response, including after testing and in particular after the occurrence of emergency situations. And with regards to emergency situations, has the organisation established communicating and providing relevant information to all workers on their duties and responsibilities? Communicating relevant information to contractors, visitors, emergency response services, the government authorities and appropriate local community officers. And taking into account the needs and capabilities of all relevant interested parties and ensuring their involvement in the development of the planned response. Clause 9 deals with performance evaluation, and as with clauses 5, 6, 7 and 8, 9 is no exception. There are quite a few subsections involved, so please take your time, catch your breath, pause and forward as you need. 9.1 relates to monitoring, measurement, analysis and performance evaluation. In general, has the organisation established, implemented and maintained a process for monitoring, measurement, analysis and performance evaluation? Does the organisation evaluate the performance and determine the effectiveness of the OHSMS management system? And does the organisation ensure that monitoring and measuring equipment is calibrated or is verified as applicable and is used and maintained as needed? Staying with 9.1, does the organisation retain appropriate documented information as evidence of the results of monitoring, measurement, analysis and performance evaluation? And also, does the organisation retain appropriate documented information on the maintenance, calibration or verification of measuring equipment? Staying with the general section in terms of evaluation, how about the criteria against which the organisation will evaluate its OHSMS performance? And when the monitoring and measuring is performed, when the results from monitoring and measurement is analysed, evaluated and communicated, and the extent to which legal and other requirements are fulfilled. But also, we need to look at activities and operations related to identified hazards, risks and opportunities for monitoring, measurement, analysis and performance evaluation. Also, progress towards achievement of the organisation's objectives for occupational health and safety, and the effectiveness of operational and other controls, and the methods for monitoring, measurement, analysis and performance evaluation to ensure valid results. Under 9.1 we also have 9.1.2, which is about evaluation of compliance. Has the organisation established, implemented and maintained a process for evaluating compliance with legal and other requirements? Does the organisation determine the frequency and methods for the evaluation of compliance, or evaluate compliance and take action if needed, maintain the knowledge and understanding of its compliance status relative to legal and other requirements, and retain documented information of the compliance evaluation results? In clause 9 we also have 9.2, which is internal audit, and in general, does the organisation conduct internal audits at planned intervals to provide information on whether the management system is effectively implemented and maintained? Do internal audits provide information on whether the management system conforms to the organisation's own requirements for its OHS management system, including the policy and objectives, and also the requirements of the OHS management system standard relative to ISO 45001? Also on 9.2 internal audit, we have the internal audit program. And does the organisation plan, establish, implement and maintain an audit program which also includes the frequency, methods, responsibilities, consultation, planning requirements and reporting, which takes into consideration the importance of the processes concerned and the results of previous audits? There's a lot to digest there, so please do pause this particular part of the video to ensure you understand all the requirements. And also, does the organisation define the audit criteria and scope for each audit, and select auditors and conduct audits to ensure objectivity and the impartiality of the audit process? Continuing with the internal audit program, does the organisation ensure that the results of the audits are reported to relevant managers, and ensure that the internal audit results are reported to workers or workers' representatives if they're applicable, and other relevant interested parties, also known as stakeholders? And does the organisation take action to address non-conformities and continually improve its OHS performance, and also retain documented information as evidence of the implementation of the audit program and the audit results? Does the organisation also take action to address non-conformities and continually improve its OHS performance? Does it retain documented information as evidence of the implementation of the audit program and the audit results? In management review in 9.3, does the top management review the organisation's management system, the OHS management system, at planned intervals to ensure its continuing suitability, adequacy and effectiveness? And does the organisation communicate the relevant outputs of management reviews to workers and workers' representatives? And also, does the organisation retain documented information as evidence of the results of management reviews? Also with management review, does the organisation review take into consideration the status of actions from previous reviews, the needs and expectations of interested parties, and legal and other requirements, as well as trends in risks and opportunities associated with changes in internal and external issues? Let's not forget the extent to which the OHS policy and the OHS objectives have also been met. They have to be reviewed. And information on the performance of the OHS management system. There are other factors to also consider, like trends in incidents, non-conformities, corrective actions and continual improvement, trends in monitoring and measurement results, the results of evaluation of compliance with legal and other requirements, mustn't forget audit results, and consultation and participation of workers. Does the management review take into consideration trends in risks and opportunities associated with the OHS performance? Or the adequacy of resources for maintaining an effective OHS management system? Relevant communication with interested parties and opportunities for improvement, for continual improvement. Also in management review, does the output of the management review include decisions related to the continuing suitability, adequacy and effectiveness of the OHS management system in achieving the organization's intended outcomes, and also continuous improvement opportunities? It also needs to look at any need for changes to the management system and any resources that are needed. Does the output of the management review include decisions related to actions if needed, opportunities to improve the integration of the OHSMS with other business units, any strategic implications for the direction of the business? Clause 10 is about improvement, and the great news is this is the last clause that we'll be dealing with in the standard. Clause 10 isn't too bad compared to the other clauses. It's fairly straightforward and it has 3 specific sections associated with the clause. The first section is a general section and it says, has the organisation determined opportunities for improvement and implemented the necessary actions to achieve the outcomes of its OHS management systems, that is, the intended outcomes. 10.2 relates to incident, non-conformity and corrective action, following on from our previous clause on auditing. Has the organisation established, implemented and maintained a process or processes, including the reporting, investigating and taking action, to determine and manage incidents and non-conformities? And does the organisation review existing assessments of OHS risks and other risks as appropriate? Does the organisation determine and implement any actions needed, including corrective actions, in accordance with the hierarchy of controls and the management of change? You may recall we discussed the hierarchy of controls in clause 8, and it's always worthwhile flicking back to that if you want to recap. Does the organisation assess the OHS risks that relate to new or changed hazards prior to taking action? Very important as a part of management of change. And does the organisation review the effectiveness of any actions taken, including corrective actions? And does the organisation make changes to the OHS management system if necessary? Are corrective actions appropriate to the effects or potential effects of the incidents or non-conformities that are encountered? Does the organisation retain documented information as evidence of the nature of the incidents or non-conformities and also any subsequent actions taken? Does the organisation retain documented information as evidence of the results of any action and corrective action, including their effectiveness? Also, does the organisation communicate this documented information to the relevant workers or representatives or other relevant interested parties / stakeholders? When an incident or a non-conformity occurs, does the organisation react in a timely manner to the incident or non-conformity? Does it take action to control and correct it? And does it deal with the consequences? This is a long particular section out of the standard, but it relates to evaluating with the participation of workers and other interested parties the need for corrective action to eliminate root causes of the incidents or non-conformity in order that it doesn't happen again. It does this by investigating the incident or reviewing the non-conformity, determining the cause of the incident or non-conformity, or determining if similar incidents have occurred, if non-conformities exist, or if they could potentially occur. On 10.3, continual improvement, Does the organisation continually improve the suitability, adequacy and effectiveness of the OHS management system by enhancing the OHS performance, promoting a culture that supports an OHS management system, promoting the participation of workers in implementing actions for continuous improvement? And how about communicating the relevant results of continuous improvement to the workers or representatives, and maintaining and retaining documented information as evidence of continuous improvement? Clause 10